Welcome. Settle in and allow your mind to drift. As the world outside grows quiet, we begin a journey not of miles, but of centuries. Tonight, we will travel along the ancient and sprawling arteries of the Silk Road, a network of routes that connected east and west, not merely with goods, but with ideas, art, and culture. This is a story that unfolds slowly, like the unrolling of a vast silk tapestry, woven with the threads of many civilizations. Our guide on this gentle expedition is a figure whose name has become synonymous with this grand adventure, Marco Polo. Close your eyes and imagine a time when the world was far larger, its distances more daunting, and its corners more mysterious. We are not rushing through history. Instead, we are meandering along its paths, listening to the quiet echoes of footsteps long past. The Silk Road was never a single highway, but a dynamic, pulsing system of trade routes, both land and sea, that stretched from the heart of China to the shores of the Mediterranean. It was a space where merchants, missionaries, and soldiers crossed paths, each leaving a trace of their own world and taking a piece of another's with them. Tonight, we explore this vast network through the lens of one of its most famous travelers. We will begin our journey far before Marco Polo was born, tracing the origins of these routes back to the great empires of antiquity, the Roman and Han dynasties, who, unaware of each other's full existence, were already linked by the simple desire for exotic goods. The rustle of Chinese silk, the aroma of Indian spices, the glint of Roman gold, these were the whispers that first drew people across deserts and mountains. Our narrative will move forward slowly, flowing like a caravan train across a silent desert. We will linger on the moments of great change, such as the rise of the Mongol Empire, which, under the leadership of figures like Genghis Khan and his grandson Kublai Khan, created an unprecedented era of peace and stability across Eurasia. This period, known as the Pax Mongolica, was the golden moment that made journeys like Marco Polo's not only possible, but, in some ways, inviting. It was a time of open borders and shared knowledge, a truly globalized world, long before the term was ever conceived. Then, we will meet Marco Polo himself. We will follow him from the canals of his native Venice, a bustling hub of maritime trade, to the rugged, awe-inspiring landscapes of Central Asia. We will traverse the towering Pamir Mountains, the roof of the world, and cross the vast, silent stretches of the Gobi Desert. We will imagine the sights and sounds that would have greeted a young Venetian merchant. The vibrant markets of Samarkand, the ancient Buddhist caves of Dunhuang, and the bustling capital of Kublai Khan. We will spend time in the court of the Great Khan, a place of unimaginable splendor and complexity. Here, Marco Polo would serve for nearly 2 decades, observing a world of technological marvels and cultural practices that were completely alien to a European mind. He would see paper money, coal for fuel, and a sophisticated postal system, all operating within the framework of the largest contiguous empire the world has ever known. This period of his life is what gives his story its profound depth and enduring fascination. Finally, we will trace his long journey home, a voyage by sea that would bring him back to a changed world and a city that barely recognized him. We will reflect on the legacy of his journey, not just in the pages of his famous book, The Travels of Marco Polo, but in the way his story helped to shape the European imagination of the East. We will also consider the eventual decline of the land-based Silk Road as maritime routes grew in prominence and new political landscapes emerged. This evening, we are not learning in the traditional sense, but absorbing. Let the names and places wash over you. There is no need to remember every detail. Simply allow the quiet narrative to carry you. The journey is long and winding, filled with both known facts and ancient mysteries. Let us begin our slow and peaceful exploration of a time when the world was connected by a network of paths that were at once vast, perilous, and utterly magnificent. We begin our journey not with Marco Polo, but with the quiet rustling of leaves and the gentle stirring of ancient dust. Our first stop is over 1,000 years before Marco's birth, in the dawn of the Silk Road itself. It is a time of immense empires that, though separated by continents, would come to be linked by a shared desire for beauty and for profit. This grand network of routes was not built in a day. It began with small, tentative connections that gradually grew into a vast and intricate system. We find our way to its origin in 2 of the world's most powerful ancient states, the Han Dynasty in the east and the Roman Empire in the west. Imagine the court of the Han Emperor in Chang'an, a city of bustling markets and monumental gates. It is the 2nd century BCE, and the emperor's gaze is fixed not on the east, but on the restless, nomadic tribes of the west, the Xiongnu. To combat their raids and secure the borders, the Han sought a powerful ally. This led to one of history's most pivotal diplomatic missions. In 138 BCE, a court official named Zhang Qian was dispatched by Emperor Wu. His mission was to forge an alliance with the Yuezhi people, who had been displaced to the west. This journey was fraught with danger. Zhang Qian was captured by the Xiongnu and held captive for a decade before he finally escaped. He continued his mission, traveling through a part of the world previously unknown to the Chinese court. He discovered thriving cities, fertile lands, and most importantly, powerful horses of a legendary breed in the Fergana Valley. When Zhang Qian finally returned to the Han court after an arduous journey of 13 years, he had failed in his initial mission to secure an alliance. However, what he brought back was far more valuable: a detailed account of the vast lands and peoples to the west. His reports, preserved in later histories, opened the eyes of the Han to the immense possibilities of trade and diplomacy. This initial exploration laid the foundational groundwork for what would become the eastern part of the Silk Road. The Han Empire now had a reason to push its borders westward, to secure these routes, and to acquire those magnificent heavenly horses for its cavalry. The routes that emerged were primarily land-based, threading their way through the desolate deserts of the Tarim Basin and over the towering Pamir Mountains. The Chinese caravans began their slow, determined journey, laden with the most famous of all commodities, silk. The production of silk, known as sericulture, was a closely guarded secret. It was a complex and delicate process, from the cultivation of mulberry trees and the feeding of silkworms to the unwinding of their cocoons and the weaving of the shimmering fabric. This exquisite material became the quintessential symbol of Chinese craftsmanship and the lifeblood of the Eastern trade. But the caravans carried more than just silk. They also transported lacquerware, fine porcelain, and precious jade. These were not just goods, they were tangible expressions of a highly sophisticated culture, objects of desire that would captivate the distant lands of the West. Now, let's drift westward, a long, quiet journey across the empty spaces of time and geography. We arrive in the vibrant, sprawling heart of the Roman Empire, a world of marble statues, bustling forums, and the thrum of a vast military machine. It is the 1st century CE, and in the markets of Rome, something new and exotic is causing a stir. It is the whispers of a fabric so fine and so luminous that it feels like liquid light. This fabric is silk. For the Romans, silk was more than a textile. It was a status symbol of the highest order. Its incredible expense and rarity made it the ultimate expression of wealth and power. Roman writers like Pliny the Elder lamented its popularity, not just for its cost, but for what they saw as its effeminate quality. Yet the Roman elite, particularly the women, could not get enough of it. The Romans had no idea where the silk truly came from, only that it arrived from a mysterious land they called Cyrrhus, the land of silk. This name itself is a testament to the singular importance of the fabric. The journey of a single bolt of silk from China to Rome was an epic one. It would pass through countless hands, each one adding to its final cost. From the Chinese merchants, it would be sold to traders in Central Asia, who would in turn sell it to Parthian or Sasanian middlemen. From there, it would travel to the ports of the Levant, like Palmyra or Antioch, before finally making its way across the Mediterranean to Rome. This was a relay race of commerce, a slow and deliberate passing of the baton from one culture to the next. The Romans paid for this luxury with a continuous flow of gold and silver coins, glass and wool, creating a massive trade imbalance that concerned Roman statesmen but delighted the distant traders of the East. It is important to remember that these two great empires, the Han and the Roman, never truly met. No Chinese emperor ever corresponded with a Roman one. The connection was indirect, a chain of exchanges where the motivations of one party were often opaque to the other. Yet the goods themselves forged an unbreakable link. The Roman fascination with Chinese silk and the Han desire for Roman glass and gold coins were the quiet drivers of a global economy. In the vast spaces between them, the routes were maintained by a diverse tapestry of peoples: the Kushans, the Parthians, the Sogdians, and later, the Byzantines. These middlemen became the crucial keepers of the road, the purveyors of not just goods, but also of ideas. And the flow of ideas was perhaps the most profound consequence of these routes. Along with the merchants and their goods came missionaries and scholars. One of the most significant exchanges was the spread of Buddhism from its origins in India. Traveling along the trade routes, Buddhist monks and merchants carried their faith to Central Asia and, eventually, to China. We can still see the silent evidence of this great migration today in the remarkable Buddhist cave temples carved into the cliffs of Dunhuang, a key oasis town on the Silk Road. The fusion of Indian, Central Asian, and Chinese artistic styles in these caves speaks to the deep cultural mingling that occurred long before Marco Polo was born. The Silk Road, therefore, was never just about silk. It was a corridor for art, religion, and technology, a conduit for the human spirit's endless curiosity. As we drift forward from this ancient era, we see that the political stability of these two great empires eventually waned. The Han dynasty fell, and the Roman Empire crumbled in the West. Yet the routes themselves did not disappear. They adapted. They were taken up by new powers and new peoples. The Byzantine Empire in the East carried on the Roman love for silk, and the powerful dynasties of China, such as the Tang and the Song, continued to foster a vibrant trade with the West. The foundations had been laid. A template for connectivity had been established. The world had been shown that despite vast distances, it could be a single, interconnected whole. This ancient, enduring network waited patiently for its next great chapter, a chapter that would be written by a new power that would arise from the steppes of Mongolia, a power that would pave the way for our hero, Marco Polo. And as we leave the ancient world behind, we can almost hear the soft, rhythmic tread of camel feet on sand and the distant, metallic clang of Roman coins being exchanged for precious, shimmering silk. It is in this quiet, enduring rhythm that the story of the Silk Road finds its true, timeless heart. We have quietly traveled through the ancient world, watching the Silk Road take shape between great empires. As those empires dimmed, the trade routes themselves entered a long, complex period of change. The fragmentation of power meant that travel once again became perilous. Many different kingdoms and smaller states controlled segments of the routes, each demanding tolls and offering little in the way of protection. But a new, unifying force was about to emerge, one that would not just reopen the roads, but transform them into a network of unprecedented scale and safety. This was the Mongol Empire. Close your eyes and let the sound of galloping horses carry you to the vast, windswept grasslands of Central Asia. It is the late 12th century, and from the nomadic tribes of the steppe, a leader of extraordinary vision and ruthless determination is rising. His name is Temujin, and he would come to be known as Genghis Khan, the universal ruler. His is a story of unification and conquest that would change the map of the world forever. From their humble origins as scattered, warring clans, the Mongols, under Genghis Khan's leadership, became an unstoppable military force, a unified whole with a singular purpose. Their light cavalry was unmatched in speed and discipline, and their ability to adapt and absorb new technologies, such as siege warfare from the Chinese, made them a formidable power. Over the course of a few decades, Genghis Khan and his successors, the Great Khans, would conquer a vast territory stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the doorstep of Europe. This immense empire was the largest contiguous land empire in all of human history. The sheer scale of their conquest was staggering, but it is not the conquest itself that is central to our story tonight. Rather, it is what happened in its aftermath. For all the destruction and upheaval of the initial invasions, the Mongol Empire brought a profound and unexpected period of stability and connection to the lands they controlled. This era, stretching across the 13th and 14th centuries, became known as the Pax Mongolica, or the Mongol Peace. The Pax Mongolica was a time of relative calm and order across the immense territories held by the various Mongol Khanates. By subjugating the many competing states and local powers, the Mongols created a single political authority across a vast, uninterrupted expanse of land. The roads, which had once been riddled with bandits and separated by hostile borders, were now patrolled by Mongol soldiers. The protection they offered was not born of altruism, but of a pragmatic understanding that a stable, safe environment was good for business. The Mongols, a nomadic people with little in the way of their own manufactured goods, relied on trade to acquire the silks, ceramics, and other luxuries they desired. Thus, they actively encouraged and protected merchants. Imagine a caravan of camels, heavy with bales of precious cargo, moving across the desert. Instead of fearing a new tax at every border crossing, the merchants now operated under a single, unified legal system known as the Yasa, the code of law laid down by Genghis Khan himself. Instead of facing constant danger, they could travel with the knowledge that the Mongol authorities would not tolerate banditry. In fact, many of the merchants were granted a special pass, a paisa, a tablet of wood or metal that was a passport of sorts, guaranteeing them safe passage and access to resources throughout the empire. This simple yet effective policy transformed the very nature of long-distance travel. The journey from Venice to China, which had once taken many years and been considered nearly impossible, became a viable, if still arduous, enterprise. One of the most remarkable innovations of this period was the Mongol communication and transportation system, the Yam. Picture a series of way stations, spaced a day's ride apart, stretching across the entire empire. At each station, fresh horses and supplies were kept ready. A messenger carrying an official order could ride at incredible speed, covering hundreds of miles in a single day by simply switching to a new horse at each station. While its primary purpose was military and administrative, this incredible infrastructure also served to facilitate the movement of merchants, envoys, and, eventually, a certain family from Venice. This interconnected web of roads and communication was a precursor to our modern postal systems and truly shrank the world in a way that had never been seen before. The Mongols also practiced a policy of remarkable religious tolerance. While they themselves largely adhered to their traditional shamanistic beliefs, they recognized the importance of a diverse population and did not seek to impose a single faith. Within the sprawling Mongol Empire, you would find Nestorian Christians, Buddhists, Muslims, and Taoists all coexisting, often with their religious leaders exempt from taxes. This policy allowed for an unprecedented exchange of ideas and beliefs. Missionaries and scholars followed the same routes as the merchants, carrying with them not just their faith, but also their knowledge of medicine, astronomy, and philosophy. The Mongols became a conduit for this intellectual and cultural exchange, a vast melting pot of civilizations that had previously been separated by vast political and geographical divides. It is into this world of extraordinary opportunity and relative peace that we now introduce the first of our travelers, the Polos. Marco's father, Niccolo, and his uncle, Maffeo, were Venetian merchants of the highest caliber. Like many others, they understood that the new political landscape of the Pax Mongolica presented an opportunity too great to ignore. They were not foolhardy adventurers, but shrewd businessmen seeking new markets. Their initial journey, which began in the 1260s, was a testament to the new security of the roads. They traveled deep into the Mongol domains, eventually reaching the court of the great Khan, Kublai Khan, a grandson of Genghis. Their reception was so positive that the Khan, intrigued by their Western knowledge, asked them to return to the West with a special request for the Pope. He wanted to learn more about Christianity and requested 100 learned men and holy oil from Jerusalem. The Polos were granted a special golden paisa for their return journey, ensuring their safety across the entire empire. The story of Marco Polo's journey, which is our central focus, is a direct result of this initial pioneering voyage. It was the Mongol peace, the unification of Eurasia under a single authority, that made the Polos' first journey possible. And it was their successful return and the Great Khan's specific request that set the stage for their second, more famous journey. They would not be traveling into a chaotic void, but into a well-ordered, albeit foreign, world. The caravan routes were no longer just a series of disconnected paths. They were the well-maintained arteries of a single immense empire. As we leave this period of Mongol ascendancy, let the echoes of 1,000 horsemen on the wind settle. We are about to meet a young man in Venice, on the brink of an adventure that would define his life and shape the West's perception of the East for centuries to come. The stage is set, the roads are open, and the world is waiting. With the political stage of the Pax Mongolica now set, we can finally begin the journey with our central characters. The year is 1271. The setting is Venice, the magnificent maritime republic of canals and commerce. Here, a young man of 17, Marco Polo, stands on the cusp of an adventure that will consume the next 2.5 decades of his life. With him are his father, Niccolò, and his uncle, Maffeo, both seasoned and successful merchants. They are not merely setting out on a new trading venture. They are fulfilling a promise and carrying a specific mission from the mighty Kublai Khan himself. The Polos' journey is a bridge between the world of medieval Europe and the heart of the Mongol-controlled East. Their departure is a quiet affair, a sharp contrast to the monumental journey ahead. From the bustling quays of Venice, they set sail across the Adriatic Sea. Their path, however, would soon veer from the sea routes and turn inland toward the great landmass of Eurasia. Their initial escort, 2 Dominican friars sent by Pope Gregory X to fulfill the Khan's request, quickly grew disheartened by the dangers ahead and turned back. The Polos, however, were made of sterner stuff. This was not their first rodeo, so to speak. Niccolò and Maffeo had already made the journey once, and they understood the landscape, both political and physical, better than most. Now, with the precious papal letters and a vial of holy oil from Jerusalem, they continued onward, a small, determined party of 3. Their first leg of the journey took them through the Kingdom of Armenia, a Christian realm situated at a crucial crossroads of the trade routes. Here, they would have seen ancient monasteries clinging to rocky mountainsides and vibrant local markets. It was a diverse and cosmopolitan region, a place where people from different faiths and backgrounds lived in close proximity. This was a prelude to the rich tapestry of cultures they would encounter further east. From Armenia, their journey continued through what is modern-day Turkey and into Persia. Persia was a land of ancient cities like Tabriz and Isfahan, with their magnificent mosques, intricate tilework, and bustling bazaars. The Polos would have been immersed in the sights, sounds, and smells of a different world. The aroma of exotic spices like saffron and cinnamon, the intricate patterns of Persian carpets, and the distant, lilting calls to prayer. These were not just stops on a map. They were immersive experiences that broadened their understanding of the world. From Persia, the real challenge of the Central Asian landscape began. The Polos had a choice of routes, and Marco's accounts suggest they traveled through the vast, arid plateaus of what are now parts of Iran and Afghanistan. This was a journey of immense hardship. The relentless sun beat down on them, the air was dry, and water sources were few and far between. Here, they would have joined a caravan, a moving community of merchants and their camels, traveling together for safety and companionship. This was the true heartbeat of the Silk Road, the slow, rhythmic progress of these land ships across an immense and indifferent landscape. The sound of their bells, the creak of their burdens, the quiet chatter of the merchants, these were the constant soundtracks to their days. The next great obstacle was a physical one of staggering proportions. The Pamir Mountains. Marco Polo's description of this region is one of the most vivid in his entire book. He writes of a plateau so high that it was known as the roof of the world, a place so cold and with such thin air that fires did not burn as brightly, and even the birds found it difficult to fly. This inhospitable terrain was home to a massive wild sheep with enormous spiraling horns, a species that was later named after him, the Marco Polo sheep, Ovis ammon polii. The sheer scale and desolation of the Pamirs must have been a humbling experience, a stark reminder of humanity's smallness against the grandeur of nature. It was a journey that tested their endurance to its absolute limits. Once they descended from the Pamirs, they entered the vast Tarim Basin, a network of oasis towns that were the lifeblood of the Eastern Silk Road. Imagine the relief they must have felt as they saw the first signs of green on the horizon. Oases like Kashgar, Khotan, and Dunhuang were more than just resting places. They were thriving hubs of trade, culture, and religion. Here, the weary travelers would have found fresh water, food, and shelter. The markets of these towns were a sensory overload, a kaleidoscope of goods, languages, and faces. They would have seen merchants from India, Persia, and China exchanging their wares. This was a world of dazzling color and vibrant sound, a stark contrast to the silent, colorless deserts they had just traversed. In places like Dunhuang, they would have seen the legacy of the Silk Road's cultural exchange in the ancient Buddhist cave temples carved into the cliffs, with their breathtaking murals and statues. The final major obstacle was the Great Gobi Desert. Marco's description of this desert is not one of mere physical hardship, but also one of supernatural wonder. He spoke of the terrifying emptiness of the Gobi, the vast, silent plains, where travelers were said to be tormented by phantom music and the whispers of evil spirits calling their names. These were the desert mirages and echoes that preyed on the minds of exhausted travelers. It was a final psychological test before they reached the heart of the Mongol Empire. Their journey across the Gobi was the last, long stage of a trek that had taken them over 3 years to complete. They had crossed mountains and deserts, navigated diverse cultures, and witnessed the breathtaking scale of the Pax Mongolica. And then, finally, they arrived. After years of slow, deliberate travel, of enduring unimaginable hardships, and witnessing incredible wonders, they reached the summer palace of Kublai Khan. This palace was known as Xanadu. The sight of it must have been surreal for the three Venetians. After the endless, punishing journey through barren landscapes, they were now standing before a place of unimaginable splendor and sophistication, the seat of power of the greatest empire the world had ever seen. Their journey was over, but their story was just beginning. It was here, in the court of the great Khan, that Marco Polo would truly come into his own, transitioning from a traveling merchant's son to a trusted diplomat and observer of a world far grander and more complex than he could have ever imagined from the streets of Venice. The silent, rhythmic tread of the camels now gives way to the bustling, ceremonial sounds of the Khan's court, a new chapter waiting to unfold. After years of relentless travel, our journey now brings us to the very heart of the Mongol Empire. The Polos have arrived at Xanadu, the great Khan's summer palace, and the contrast between the rugged, empty landscapes they have just traversed and the opulent, sophisticated world they now find themselves in is breathtaking. Imagine a vast park enclosed by walls, a verdant and beautiful place where a marble and gilded palace stands next to a light, mobile, and exquisitely crafted hunting lodge made of bamboo. This was the legendary Xanadu, a place of power and pastoral beauty, a fitting seat for the ruler of the known world. The moment of their introduction to Kublai Khan is a pivotal one. The Polos were not simply granted an audience, they were received with honor and curiosity. For the Khan, they were not just foreign merchants, but a link to a world he knew little about. He was a man of immense power, but also a man of deep curiosity and a keen intellect. He was a grandson of Genghis Khan, a great warrior and administrator who had completed his grandfather's vision by conquering China and establishing the Yuan dynasty. Yet, he was also a man of culture who supported arts and sciences. Marco's account paints a picture of a ruler who was not the barbaric conqueror of European nightmares, but a sophisticated monarch, a true emperor of all he surveyed. It was here that Marco Polo began his true education. His father and uncle, seasoned merchants, were interested in commerce. But Marco, a curious and observant teenager, was interested in everything. He was a gifted linguist, quickly picking up the languages of the court. Kublai Khan, who valued intelligence and good reporting, took a particular liking to the young Venetian. He recognized in Marco a unique talent for observation. The Khan's empire was so vast that it was difficult to get reliable information from its far-flung provinces. So, the great Khan began to use Marco as his personal envoy, a kind of special commissioner. Marco's task was to travel to distant regions of the empire, observe local customs, politics, and daily life, and then report back to the Khan. Crucially, the Khan instructed him to not only report on what he saw, but also to do so in an interesting and engaging way, so that his stories would be more entertaining than those of the dull, bureaucratic officials. This role as an envoy is what makes Marco's story so unique and his book so rich in detail. Over the next 17 years, Marco Polo would travel extensively across the Mongol Empire. He would serve as an administrator in the city of Yangzhou and as a governor in a province for a period. He would travel to the farthest reaches of what is now China, to the cities of Yunnan and Tibet, and to the bustling port cities on the eastern coast. He saw firsthand the incredible scale of the Mongol administrative machine and the technological and cultural sophistication of the Chinese. At the heart of the Mongol administration was the city of Khanbalik, the city of the Khan, which we know today as Beijing. Imagine this city, a world of monumental grandeur far surpassing anything in medieval Europe. Marco's description of the city is one of awe. He speaks of the great walls, the broad, straight streets laid out in a grid, and the magnificent palaces. But it was the innovations and daily practices that would have astounded him most. He was a Venetian, a man from a city of silver coins and trade. In the Mongol court, he saw the use of paper money. The Khan had a currency of printed paper made from the bark of mulberry trees. This currency was accepted throughout the empire, and anyone who refused it was punished severely. To a European, this would have seemed like magic, a worthless piece of paper being treated as if it were solid gold. But for the Mongols, it was a practical and efficient way to manage a huge economy without the burden of vast amounts of precious metal. Another technological marvel Marco observed was the widespread use of coal for heating and cooking. In Venice, and throughout Europe, wood was the primary fuel. But in the Mongol-controlled North China, people were mining a type of black stone that burned longer and hotter than wood. Marco's descriptions of this fuel, which we know as coal, must have seemed fantastical to his European audience, a testament to the advanced state of Chinese technology. He also described the efficiency of the yam system, the postal relay network, from an insider's perspective. He would have used it himself, traveling from one station to the next with fresh horses, able to cover immense distances with remarkable speed. It was a clear demonstration of the Khan's ability to control and connect his vast empire. But Marco's travels and observations extended beyond technology and administration. He was a keen observer of culture and daily life. He described the religious tolerance of the Mongols, who had embraced a multitude of faiths, from Buddhism and Taoism to Nestorian Christianity and Islam. He observed the unique customs of different ethnic groups and the incredible variety of foods, clothing, and architectural styles across the empire. He traveled to the port cities, where he saw ships of immense size, far larger than any European vessel, with multiple masts and waterproof compartments, technologies that would not reach Europe for centuries. These observations revealed to him a world that was not only different, but in many ways more advanced than his own. For nearly 2 decades, Marco served in this capacity. He was no longer just Marco Polo, a merchant's son from Venice. He was a man of the Khan, an integral part of the world's most powerful court. His book, The Travels of Marco Polo, is not just a travelogue. It is an incredible ethnographic and historical account, a collection of observations made by a man with unparalleled access. He saw things that no other European had ever seen, and recorded them for a world that was barely ready to believe them. Yet, after so many years, the pull of home grew stronger. The Polos, now wealthy and respected, wished to return to Venice. The great Khan, however, had grown fond of them and was reluctant to let them go. Their stay was long and prosperous, but a new desire was beginning to stir in their hearts, a desire for the familiar sounds of the Venetian lagoon. The time was coming for their long and arduous journey to begin again, but this time it would be in the other direction. The court life, with all its splendor and intrigue, was about to become a cherished memory, replaced by the new and equally challenging adventure of the voyage home. We have now spent nearly 2 decades with Marco Polo in the heart of the Mongol Empire, observing its splendor and its vastness through his eyes. Yet, as the years stretched on, the 3 Venetians began to feel the pull of home. They had grown incredibly wealthy and respected, but the deep longing for their native city, for the familiar sights and sounds of Venice, became an irresistible force. They had lived a life of adventure and privilege, but they were ready to return to the rhythms of their own culture. Kublai Khan, however, had grown immensely fond of them. He had come to rely on their insights and their trustworthiness. For years, he had refused to grant them permission to leave, perhaps unwilling to part with the few Westerners he truly respected. The Polos were in a golden cage, albeit a very comfortable one. A unique and unexpected opportunity, however, finally presented itself. This fortunate turn of events was an incredible stroke of luck, or perhaps destiny. In the year 1291, a Mongol princess named Kokachin was to be sent to Persia to marry Arghun Khan, a Mongol ruler in that region. The land route, which the Polos had taken on their outward journey, was now considered too perilous due to political strife. A sea voyage seemed to be the safest option. Knowing of the Polos' extensive experience with both the Mongols and foreign lands, and trusting their abilities more than anyone else's, Kublai Khan entrusted them with this vital and delicate mission. He placed the princess in their care and gave them a special fleet of 14 magnificent ships, ensuring they had everything they needed for the journey. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The return journey, however, was in many ways as arduous as the one out, though it presented a new kind of challenge. This time, the Polos would not be traveling across deserts and mountains, but across the endless expanse of the sea. The ships they traveled on were a marvel of technology for their time. Marco describes them in detail, noting their immense size and sophisticated construction. These were the great junks of the Chinese fleet, vessels far larger and more advanced than any European ship of the 13th century. They were constructed with multiple masts, watertight compartments, and over 300 crew members, a testament to the immense naval power of the Khan's empire. As we leave the sounds of the court behind, we now hear the creak of timber, the flapping of sails, and the rhythmic lapping of waves against the hull. The sea voyage was a journey of over 2 years, a slow and deliberate passage across the vast Indian Ocean. The Polos and their precious cargo would have navigated through storms and endured the monotony of the open sea. But they also made many stops along the way, each one a new window into a world of incredible diversity. They stopped in places like Sumatra, Ceylon, modern-day Sri Lanka, and the Malabar coast of India. Marco's descriptions of these places are filled with wonder. He speaks of the rich spice trade of India, where pepper, ginger, and cardamom were traded in massive quantities. He describes the exotic animals he saw, the incredible wealth of the local rulers, and the strange customs of the people. This part of his journey filled his mind with new tales of wonder, adding yet another layer to the already dense tapestry of his experiences. He saw pearl divers in the waters off Ceylon and the incredible abundance of resources in the islands of the East. Despite the grandeur of the journey and the advanced ships, it was a perilous voyage. Marco's account tells a sobering tale of the terrible losses they suffered. Of the 600 people who embarked on the journey, only 18 would survive, a tragic number that underscores the unforgiving nature of the sea and the immense challenges of such a long voyage. But Marco and his family, along with the princess, were among the survivors. After a journey of more than 2 years by sea, they finally arrived in Persia. There, they successfully delivered Princess Kokachin to her new husband. Their mission was complete, and they had once again proven their worth as trusted envoys. From Persia, they then began the long, final leg of their journey by land, making their way slowly back toward the familiar shores of the Mediterranean. It was in the year 1295, a full 24 years after they had first set out, that the three Polos finally returned to Venice. Their homecoming, however, was not the joyful celebration one might expect. They arrived, wealthy and in strange Mongol-style clothing, to a city that had long given them up for dead. Their relatives did not recognize them. Only when they revealed the immense wealth they had accumulated, precious gems sewn into the linings of their old clothes, did the family finally believe who they were. The story of their return is itself a legend, a quiet ending to a grand adventure. But the story of Marco Polo was not yet over. His final chapter would be written not on the road, but in a quiet prison cell. A few years after his return, Venice found itself at war with its great maritime rival, the city-state of Genoa. Marco Polo was captured in a naval battle and imprisoned. In his cell, he met a Pisan writer named Rustichello, a man who specialized in writing romantic tales. Marco began to dictate the stories of his incredible journey to Rustichello. What emerged was the book we know today as The Travels of Marco Polo. It was an immediate sensation, a book that read like a romance, but was filled with verifiable detail about places no European had ever seen. Marco's tales of paper money, of a unified Mongol empire, of the splendor of the great Khan's court, and of distant, exotic lands were so fantastic that many people found them hard to believe. They even gave him a nickname, Il Milione, or the Million, because of his seemingly endless talk of millions of things he had seen. As we conclude this chapter, reflect on the power of this single book. It was not just a travelogue, it was a window into a vast and unknown world. It was a bridge of knowledge that would slowly but surely seep into the European consciousness, challenging existing notions of geography and culture. The echoes of Marco's voice, dictating his memories in that Genoese prison, would reverberate for centuries, inspiring a new generation of explorers who, armed with his words, would seek to find their own paths to the riches of the East. The sounds of the distant sea are now replaced by the soft scratch of a quill on parchment, a quiet, final act that sealed the legacy of one of history's greatest journeys. As we conclude our long journey through time and across continents, we arrive in a world that is slowly, subtly changing once more. The sound of a quill scratching on parchment in a Genoese prison cell is the quiet starting point for the final chapter of our story. Marco Polo's book, The Travels of Marco Polo, was not just a personal memoir. It was a blueprint for a new understanding of the world. While many of his contemporaries dismissed his tales as fantastical fables, giving him the nickname Il Milione, the man who speaks of millions of things, his work would endure, slowly permeating the European consciousness and forever altering the continent's perception of the East. The book became a crucial source of information for cartographers, scholars, and most importantly, future explorers. It was read and reread by generations of adventurous minds. The world Marco Polo described was one of staggering wealth and exotic beauty, a land of spices, silk, and gold beyond European comprehension. This vision of a wealthy East, now accessible through a detailed account, became a powerful motivator. It ignited the European imagination and spurred a new kind of ambition, the ambition to find these lands for themselves. A copy of Marco's book, with its detailed descriptions of the Far East, was famously carried by Christopher Columbus on his westward voyage in 1492. Columbus's entire mission was based on the belief that by sailing west, he could find the lands described by Marco Polo and establish a new, direct trading link with them. The legacy of Marco's travels, therefore, is not just in his words, but in the way those words directly inspired the age of exploration. But even as Marco's story was inspiring new voyages, the very trade routes he had traveled were beginning to lose their luster. The Pax Mongolica, the very foundation of his journey, was beginning to crumble. After the death of Kublai Khan, the immense Mongol Empire started to fragment. Different khanates fought amongst themselves, and the unified legal and security systems that had made the Silk Road so safe and efficient for so many decades disappeared. With the decline of a single, powerful authority, the routes became once again a collection of dangerous paths, rife with bandits, high tariffs, and political instability. The journey that Marco had made so successfully was now fraught with peril and unpredictability. Simultaneously, a new power was emerging that would completely change the geopolitical landscape of the trade routes. The rise of the Ottoman Empire in the 14th and 15th centuries effectively put a powerful, centralized authority in control of the crucial choke points of the overland routes to the west. The Ottomans, while still engaging in trade, levied heavy taxes on goods passing through their territory. This made the overland journey for spices, silks, and other goods not only dangerous, but also prohibitively expensive. And then, a silent, unseen force traveled along the same routes that had once brought wealth and new ideas. In the mid-14th century, the bubonic plague, or the Black Death, swept from Asia into Europe. It is believed to have spread along the trade routes, carried by merchants and caravans. This catastrophic plague decimated populations, disrupted economies, and further fractured the fragile network of trade. The very connections that had once enriched the world now served as a conduit for its greatest catastrophe. The world that had been so tightly connected by the Silk Road was now separating again, physically and psychologically. With the land routes becoming increasingly dangerous, expensive, and unreliable, European nations were forced to look for alternatives. The focus shifted from the land to the sea. The 15th century saw the emergence of powerful maritime empires, primarily from Portugal and Spain. Their goal was to find a direct sea route to Asia, bypassing the costly overland routes and the Ottoman middlemen entirely. The invention of better ships, new navigational tools, and the slow accumulation of geographical knowledge made these ambitious sea voyages possible. This new age culminated in Vasco da Gama's successful voyage around the Cape of Good Hope in 1498, a monumental achievement that opened up a direct maritime route to the riches of India and beyond. This event marks the true end of the Silk Road's golden age. The flow of commerce, which had for so many centuries followed the slow rhythm of camels across deserts, now sailed on the faster, more efficient winds of the Indian and Pacific Oceans. The center of global trade shifted from the heart of Eurasia to the coastal cities of Europe. The great oasis towns of Central Asia, which had once been the vibrant, bustling hubs of a global economy, began a slow and gentle fade into obscurity. The silent sands once again claimed the ancient paths. And so, we leave our story. The Silk Road was more than just a network of trade routes. It was a testament to the human spirit of curiosity, endurance, and exchange. It was a space where civilizations met, clashed, and mingled. It was a conduit for silk and spices, but also for art, religion, and the flow of knowledge. Marco Polo's journey was a unique and extraordinary moment in that history, a personal adventure that opened up an entire world. His story reminds us that even in a seemingly vast world, we are all connected, linked by our shared desire for discovery and understanding. The rhythm of the camel bells on the silent desert wind has faded, replaced by the gentle lapping of waves on a distant shore. Let these quiet echoes of the past lead you now into a peaceful night.